Guys, let's move into what I'm here to talk about, the European retail and the effect of COVID-19 on retail. And I'm going to give you some numbers. You heard some numbers this morning from Jesper. I'm going to give you some numbers more on in a European context. And this is not a Forrester report. This is not a research report. This is something super biased and super subjective from a professional that's been in the business for a while and been in fashion for the last 6 and 7 years. So with that disclaimer, I want to start off with these stats from Eurostat. This just came out. It compares January 2020 with July 2020, and it pretty much paints a grim picture for consumption in general, like you just saw. For Europe, it's a little bit worse than it is for Nordics and for Denmark, but I don't want to go too much into the detail, just shout out a couple of things that I think is important here. First and foremost, you see the textile clothes and footwear losing heavily. You see online being the big winner. So we have a clear loser in the consumption. We have a clear winner in the consumption. So how does that fit with my perception talking to retailers and being in the retail industry for a while? Well, it fits pretty well. So in the last 5 years, some people are saying that fashion retail, physical retail, have lost 50% of the footfall in 5 years. It's ridiculous. You can probably imagine what that effect will be on a store. Also, it is probably only to great salesmanship and cost focus that these guys have actually held on to a somewhat decent EBIT margin of, let's say, 1 to 4%, 1 to 5%, something like that. And I have to say that that is just a very difficult business to be in. We also seen malls, for instance. Malls have started to implement parcel shops in their spaces that would normally be retail. They have also very much put coffee shops there. I have to say that the number of coffee shops in malls these days is a little bit ridiculous. I like coffee, but I cannot drink that much coffee. It's not possible. Also, big box retail such as the Bilkas in Denmark, the Carrefours in the rest of Europe, these big box retailers, they're trying to get rid of their sales areas. They simply cannot keep up their sales per square meter in those big boxes. That's why you start seeing all these Carl's Jr. and Starbucks and all kinds of different formats in the big box retailers. So that's kind of looking back 5 years perhaps. That's the development in the last 5 years. And then something very recent, when I talk to retailers, and I talk to retailers from Norway to Spain, and I have to say that what shines through is that they're telling me that they are getting at, currently, year to date, they're at around 70% of their normal turnover, year to date. So they're 30% behind of where they should be in fashion retail. This is subjective stance, obviously, but it's huge. Something other interesting they tell me is that whenever the authorities get on stage in a press release, dressed in black, saying we need to be careful, we need to take precautions, their customers disappear the same day. When there's a press release at 2, there's no one in the stores at 4. That's how it is. And they're not coming back the day after. It takes a couple of days before slowly they start coming in. So those are some of the learnings I've had or seen. And then I thought to myself, okay, this is, you could probably call it anecdotal evidence. Does it really fly? Can I justify this? Can I put something below it? Well, one thing I did was that I looked at retail-heavy stocks. I looked at H&M, you know H&M. I looked at Inditex, one of the biggest fashion conglomerates in the world, and especially in Europe. It's the Zara, it's the Massimo Dutti, it's the Stradivarius, Pull & Bear, these guys. I looked at LVMH, high luxury brands, and I looked at VF Corp. VF Corp is the North Face, for instance, and Timberland. And one thing shines through all of these. They have dropped 20 to 30% of their stock value in the last 9 to 10 months, so year to date. And I don't see a lot of exceptions to this. LVMH is not dropping as much. They're actually pretty doing good with a lower drop, like 5%. My reasoning would be that it's super high price points. The people that buy a lot of Louis Vuitton, for instance, they probably are not as affected from COVID. And they also have spirits in the portfolio like Hennessy, which is not as affected as accessories, for instance, and fashion. So they're not dropping as much. But these guys, they are struggling, not day-to-day transactional, they are probably also struggling, but they are struggling on in the market as well. Then I looked at pure players and platforms becoming more valuable. So I looked at Amazon. It's not a European company, but as we just talked about, they're going into Nordics. They are rather large in rest of Europe. They're especially large in Germany. I looked at ASOS, the UK-based fashion retailer. Boost, a very, very cool, in my view, Scandinavian retailer who's doing super well. Wayfair, we don't talk a lot about Wayfair, and it's not fashion, but it's the biggest furniture retailer in the world. It's huge, and it's purely online. And then Zalando, of course. And I'm not saying there's a connection, but I moved to Helsinki 15th of March. So just all in all, I think I can say that year to date, the increase in the stock price is about 60 to 70% for all of these. Okay, I picked these out, didn't I? It is not entirely random. There are people that do better than this. There's also people that do worse. But the trend, I think, is pretty clear. I think the spot where it's not super clear is probably the Adidas and the Nikes of the world. People that have very strong brands and at the same time understand digitization. They are losing a little bit or slightly increasing, not as clear as this. But Adidas, for instance, and Nike are increasing in the last 9 months. And they have a very big retail focus. But they also started 10 years ago talking about digitization, joining marketplaces, figuring out how does that work? How can we create more visitors to our own sites, for instance? So there are nuances in between, but I think these sets the line pretty well. All right. Let me just sum this up with this slide. This stuck with me a while back when I saw it the first time. It's McKinsey based on a Forrester report and Bank of America looking at transactional data in US. There is a rule of thumb that has been going on since around 2001, where if you look at the total retail, then in 2001, online was about 1% of total retail. 2002, it's about 2%, and so on and so forth. Ending up with 2019 being around 16% total penetration of online in the market. These are US numbers. What happened in Q1 2020 is that this spiked to 34%, so up a little less than 20% points of penetration. Obviously, this is also dependent on consumption coming down and online becoming bigger and stuff like that. So I don't think we can take the 34% as kind of the new normal. It's gonna go back, already has, I reckon. But I think it talks about the fact that online is here to stay. I was in the room once when the CEO of Salling Group actually said, I don't know if this online thing is going to be big. I think it became pretty big. So why is this? So I'm painting a pretty grim picture, right? I'm painting a grim picture for physical retail. It's not entirely true. I'll come back to why. But I think one thing that is critical is that physical retail transform their business model fundamentally. And I think there are two ways they should transform their business model. One, the lease rates need to go down on their retail estates. It's critical and it needs to come down significantly. It's not going to be fast, but it needs to happen over time. We already see outside the densely populated areas that there are simply stores that are not filled. Their retail space is not filled. That's number one. I can't do anything about that, but I can do something about number two, which is retail today is solely reliant on a single demand channel. As a starting point, they're relying on the customer coming in the door, and that's it. And it's just a super fragile business model in this environment. It needs to transform into something where there are more demand channels coming into the store. A typical store has a proximity, you could say, of sales of, let's say, 30 kilometers. If you're in a non-densely populated country, like, for instance, Denmark, where we have a lot of stores for only 6 million people. So that's probably small. It's probably about 10, 15 kilometers, but 30 kilometers for a fashion store, that's a lot. That's what you have in Germany. And that is a very inefficient way of dealing with your stock that you can only sell to people that are within 30 kilometers. Boosting that by taking in customers from around the country and perhaps even around Europe, that's probably the most efficient way of boosting your demand channel, so you have more demand channels coming in. And of course, I'm super biased here, right? I'm standing here from Zalando with a group of Zalando that basically working with physical retailer. So obviously I would want each and every retailer to hook up to Zalando. But my point is here, it doesn't really matter if it's Zalando. You need to get started working with Instagram, Facebook, Amazon, whoever you think is the right thing, or even your own .com if you think you can make enough revenue there. But getting more demand channels, that's absolutely critical. So how can we then do that? What are the partnerships? How can this be done? And I'm also going to tell you about connected retail. But first, I'm going to just nuance the bleak picture I did a little bit for physical retail. So how do you build multiple demand channels? And why is it worth doing? Well, let me just be clear that the grim picture I painted is not as grim. We also look at data from Google recently saying that year on year, the near me searches on Google were up 4 times. So when you search for supermarket that is close to you, then that's up 4 times. When you search for products that are close to you, I need a new hoodie, where can I get it? That's up 2.5 times. So people are clearly expecting something local, something within proximity. That's an absolute convenience factor for most consumers. And then possibly the biggest thing for me, that did it for me, when we do qualitative research and quantitative research on customers buying on Zalando, they're telling us they love physical retail, which is not nice to hear for the old guys in Zalando that kind of loves online retail. But I can tell you, for a guy like me, that's an obvious thing. Of course they'd say that. Why wouldn't they? So now I'm going to talk about 3 things where I think physical retail is going to make a fundamental difference and where online retail has a large difficulty competing. First and foremost, availability. 90% of all fashion items in the market are on the shelf in stores. They're not in Zalando's warehouse, they're not in Amazon's warehouse, they're not in Boost's warehouse, they're in stores, 90%. So stores simply have a massive advantage when it comes to the sheer volume of articles. And that's both deep in the assortment, so there's simply more of each individual item, but there's also more items, basically. That's number 1. It's super difficult for us that are in the online business to compete with that because we also need to take risks every time we buy more stuff. Speed. So retailers, physical retailers are paying good prices for being where they are, and they're paying very good prices even today, and we are not going to be able to compete with that. If I buy something in Helsinki, it takes, first and foremost, it takes around 7 days to get there, even with Zalando, and we don't have the worst delivery network, I think. Then 7 days is simply too much. If I can buy it from a store nearby, I can have it in 1 day or 2 days. Norway, probably the best example I can give. It's outside EU. Every time we send something from a Swedish or a German warehouse, it needs to pass through customs. It takes forever. So if we can just take it from a store, that's simply a lot better. And so speed, that's where physical retail can bring something that online retailers probably cannot compete with, almost no matter how much we try. And then the last bit, sustainability. So it's pretty obvious that when you have a lot of goods, you have them in a good spot, and you're capable of shipping fast. It's also because the simple mileage for each product is just lower. If I buy something in Helsinki, I get it shipped from Stockholm, or even it could also be coming from a warehouse further away. And with the return rates in fashion, for instance, we just put a lot of mileage into each product. And that part, I think we can do something about, or physical retail can do something about right now. There is a competitive advantage there that they simply have the product within a decent proximity of the consumer. On these 3 topics, I do not believe that online trade can fundamentally compete. We can compete, but it's always going to be a skewed competition. All right. A little bit about connected retail. Connected retail is the part of Zalando where we collaborate and do partnerships with local retailers. So connected retail does ship from store today. So basically a customer buys online. We send the order to the store. The store sends it out. We send the money minus a commission to the store. That's how it works. It's a marketplace solution. We have been pretty quiet about this in Nordics so far. We have been launching in Germany 2 to 3 years ago, and we are currently at plus 1,500 stores. We did 3.2 million orders year to date. at a pretty decent basket size. So we're passing on a significant amount of revenue to the stores. We are currently in Germany, Netherlands, Spain, Poland, Sweden, 5 countries, and we're going into Denmark, we're going into Norway, and we're going into Finland around 1st of November, so in a month's time. All right. For me, a partnership is where the partner you have arrives into the meeting in bigger cars than yours. So basically, we want to make sure that the partner we talk to or we work with are capable of making entirely their own decisions. They need to do their own salesmanship. So for us, the retailer decides the price, they decide the inventory, what they want to sell, when they want to sell it, how much they want to sell. There are no sign-up fees, there's no cost, fixed cost every month. There's none of that. You can step in with 2 weeks notice, you can step out with one day's notice. That is what we in Connected Retail, Zalando, call a partnership. That's all I had for you.